Going to be recording our program tonight. So we ask that the participants at home turn your cameras off and your microphones off too. So welcome. Tonight's program is Fall in Western Massachusetts. I'm Susan McBride and I'm here with my coworker, Mike Edding, and we're going to take you on a tour of the beautiful areas of Western Massachusetts. So why Western Massachusetts? Well, there's a lot of reasons to visit this area. The small towns in Western Massachusetts are close in proximity. They are sometimes only 5 or 6 miles apart. And to get from one town to the next, you drive on picturesque, winding, small, 2-lane streets that go through forests and mountains. And it makes it easy and enjoyable to explore the areas, particularly in the fall. And speaking of fall, Western Massachusetts is one of the country's most beautiful fall color locations. It has vast areas of unspoiled nature, lots of outdoor activities, so you can truly bathe yourself in the fall colors. In addition, there are charming inns with gorgeous vistas for you to stop over and relax overnight. There are captivating museums, and Western Massachusetts is known for their farm-to-table dining experience. It's one thing that they do really well in the Berkshires, which are the farthest western area of Massachusetts. Many restaurants and Airbnbs or bread and breakfasts integrate locally sourced ingredients into their menu. And so we're going to be mentioning a couple of the most interesting restaurants that are farm to table dining options throughout the program as they come up. And then finally, Western Massachusetts towns are rooted in community and rooted in nature. And it's just a really great, warm part of the country to visit. So in thinking about going to Western Massachusetts in the fall, you want to hit peak color season because it's so absolutely gorgeous. I've put a website up here that when we send you the slides, you can click on it and get to a kind of a map that's interactive, and you can click on the calendar dates and it will show you whether it's early, whether it's mid, whether it's peak, or whether it's past peak. But in general, peak color is going to be about the 1st or 2nd week of October. Color, though, will extend from the middle of September to the middle of October. So anytime in there, you're going to get a beautiful trip. And in that time frame, you're going to hit temperatures that are range in the mid 40s to the lower 60s, and only about a 30% chance of rain. So it's a really great time weather-wise to visit the area. So today's itinerary, we're going to start in the 5 colleges region, then we're going to talk about Springfield, and then we're going to move further west to the Berkshires. So the 5 colleges region, we're going to talk about Amherst, Montague, Northampton, and Mount Skinner. And I'm going to show you on a map. This is the kind of the map of Massachusetts. Here's Boston. I don't know if it's not showing up on the thing, but Western Massachusetts is about an hour and a half or so just due west of Boston. And the 5 colleges region is named that because there are 5 colleges that make up a consortium in there. Smith, Mount Holyoke, UMass Amherst, and Hillsdale, Hillshire. I have it in my program later on. So let's start in Amherst. The town of Amherst is located in what is known as the Pioneer Valley of Western Massachusetts, and that whole area is called the Pioneer Valley. Amherst is a diverse, inclusive community. It hosts Hampshire College, which is the one I forgot, Amherst College, and University of Massachusetts at Amherst. So this density of a higher education population provides many educational and cultural opportunities. The town is the most populous in the county. It is a really vibrant intellectual hub. It has a lively downtown with an independent movie theater and lots of coffee shops and restaurants, some museums and galleries. And it has this backdrop of a historical architecture and blooming flower gardens. It's looks like a movie set for the quintessential New England town, only it's real. It's not a movie set. Like much of the rest of the area, Amherst is known for its bookishness, its artsiness, and local food obsession. It is a very open and tolerant community, and it's extremely beautiful. You will see a lot of farms in the area, farm stands, and fresh foods. Speaking of which, you will want to hit the farmers market if you're there on a Saturday. It's in the downtown area. It runs through November 19th in the morning, 7:30 to 1:30, and it's definitely worth a visit to get all the fresh produce from the area. Once you've loaded up on that, head over to the Emily Dickinson Museum. The Emily Dickinson Museum comprises two historic houses that it's right in the center of Amherst. The homestead is the birthplace and the home of Emily Dickinson, and the Evergreens, which is right next door, was home to her brother Austin, his wife, and their 3 children. When you go to the museum, you can get a glimpse into what Emily Dickinson's life was like. You will tour her home, and you can tour the museum's collection of about 8,000 artifacts that include family objects such as artwork, textiles, furniture, dinnerware, and other household items. From there, you may want to take a 9-minute drive to the south of Amherst to the Eric Carle Museum of Picture Book Art. And if you know Eric Carle, he wrote Brown Bear, and The Very Hungry Caterpillar, and had very striking artwork in his books. Well, this museum with his name on it is devoted to the art that is in the picture books of children's books. It's adjacent to the campus of Hampshire College, and it has a 40,000 square foot facility that is loved by art aficionados and families and book lovers alike. The museum houses 3 galleries with rotating exhibits of picture book art from around the world, but then it also has a permanent collection that includes artists such as Maurice Sendak and Leo Leone and Rosemary Wells, and of course, Eric Carle. And it also has a hands-on art studio where you can create your own masterpiece. It's a fun visit for kids, but also for adults as well. Right across the street from the Carle Museum is Atkins Farm Market. And Atkins has been growing apples for over 100 years. And they have a quaint, charming country market that sells their apples, but also a variety of other locally grown produce. In the fall, you want to make sure to stop at their bakery and get their apple cider donuts. And you can also pick up a sandwich from the deli and take it with you for a picnic lunch at Puffer's Pond, which I'll be talking about in a minute, or take it to the Mount Holyoke Range State Park, where you can also have a nice picnic. The Mount Holyoke Range State Park is about 1.5 miles down the road from Atkins, so it's really convenient. It's one of the only, the Mount Holyoke Range is one of the only east to west mountain ranges. Most of the mountain ranges in the country run north to south, but this runs east to west, and it's located roughly between Northampton and Amherst. It's a 3,000-acre state park, and it features a 7-mile mountain range line. There are more than 30 miles of trails to be explored, but probably the most popular is the Seven Sisters Trail. It's an 8-mile trail that traverses both Mount Holyoke Range State Park and Skinner Park. It travels through a series of summits and lookouts and eventually ends at the Holyoke Summit House, which Mike's going to tell you a little bit more when we get to his portion and he talks about Skinner Park. If you picked up a sandwich at Atkins Market and you're looking for an idyllic picnic spot, Puffer's Pond might be a great choice. It's a local favorite. It's just north of Amherst, about 3 miles. It's a beloved destination and has been described as a truly magical spot, and you can see why in this photo. It's the largest body of water in Amherst. The pond is about 11 acres, and it's a great prominent recreation area for fishing and birding, nature walking, canoeing, picnicking, and in the summer, it's a really favorite picnics or swimming spot. They've got a sandy beach, and it's a very popular place to go. The pond is fed by the Mill River, and it spills over, as you can see in the lower right-hand corner, it spills over a dam and creates this gorgeous cascade at one end of the pond. And like I said, during summer months, you're likely to see visitors spread out with picnic blankets and taking a dip in the pond. So 20 minutes further north out of Amherst, you're going to discover the town of Montague. Montague is a quiet community, but it's worth visiting for 2 reasons. It's incredibly scenic, and it has this really cool bookstore, the Montague Book Mill. Just north of the town of Montague is this French King Bridge. It has one of the most spectacular views in the state. It's breathtaking, and it's well worth the drive. And then a few miles south of the bridge, you're going to find this famous Montague Book Mill. And this iconic bookstore is housed in an 1834 grist mill, and it's perched over a series of waterfalls along the river. And it's truly a destination bookstore. It really defines what a destination bookstore is. And it might just be the most charming bookstore in the country. The store's motto is books you don't need in a place you can't find. And that is kind of true, although with Google Maps, it's definitely easier to find. They also claim to have 40,000 books and 1 waterfall. But you never know what you're going to find at this used bookstore, and you're guaranteed to find something interesting. The cozy inside makes you feel like you're in somebody's cottage with comfy chairs where you can sit and peruse your finds. Writers and academics frequent the bookstore, and it's adjacent to a cafe known as Lady Killigrew. And you'll also find musicians and artists and farmers and all sorts of people coalescing at this one interesting bookstore. Outside is a deck that overlooks the river, and there are tables and umbrellas, and you can sit and read your books and enjoy a treat from the Lady Killigrew Cafe. The Sawmill River runs right by the book mill and flows right in front of it as you're sitting out on the deck. It's really nice. After visiting the book mill, if you're still thirsty for something a little stronger, you might consider stopping by Element Brewing, which is a craft brewery. And they take the science of brewing the perfect beer very seriously. And if you like dark beer, the Dark Oak is definitely worth a try. And now we're going to move on to Northampton, and Mike is going to take over.
Thank you, Susan. So Northampton, Massachusetts is one of the great small towns in America due to its culture, its beautiful downtown, its lovely setting in the Pioneer Valley, and abundant charm. My introduction to Northampton came through the words of Tracy Kidder, Pulitzer Prize author who wrote the book Hometown. It's a nonfiction work and it's narrative nonfiction, so it reads in a very gripping and interesting way, kind of like fiction does. So he writes about various characters that live in Northampton, one of which is returning to the town after being away for several years, and the changes that it's undergone that are happening everywhere in America, and what's stayed the same and what's changed. And it's kind of portrayed with a very clear eye, but it's wistful at the same time. I highly recommend this book if you have a chance, and this one is available for checkout. Northampton's main claim to fame is being the home of Smith College, one of the truly elite women's colleges in the United States. It has a really impressive slate of alumna, including Julia Child, Gloria Steinem, Margaret Mitchell, author of Gone with the Wind, and Sylvia Plath, who wrote The Bell Jar, based on her summer position working for Mademoiselle magazine after her third year at Smith. It has a beautiful campus and is well worth a stroll. I'd suggest making a stop at Paradise Pond, which is a very peaceful spot, which is home to the campus boathouse. You can see that over to the upper right of your screen. Students can enjoy kayaking and canoeing there. Smith is also known for a really nice museum of art, one of the best college museums of art in the country. It has works by Degas, Corot, Courbet, Cézanne, Monet, and Bierstadt. And finally, you might want to take a look at the Lyman Conservatory on campus, which is kind of like the Garfield Park Conservatory, but smaller. It's home to scores of plants and is an instructional environment for the students there, as well as open to the public. It's a warm place to go if you're there in the cooler months, for sure. One of the great things about Northampton is it's downtown. It's replete with all these independent stores and restaurants. It's perfect for an afternoon of retail therapy. One notable collection of these is in Thorns. It's a little tiny mall on Main Street that has about 20 businesses under its roof, including a really nice ice cream shop and a store featuring Tibetan jewelry and handicrafts, for example. So it's really one of those quintessential New England college towns, and I'd highly recommend checking out Northampton. East of Northampton, you'll find Skinner State Park, which Susan has already mentioned. It has a great view of Northampton and the Connecticut River from Mount Holyoke, which is the westernmost peak of that mountain range that Susan was mentioning. You can take your car to the top in warm weather months. At other times, you'll have to make the journey on foot. Parking is $5 for cars that have Massachusetts plates. So if you get a rental, hopefully it has Mass plates, and $20 for other cars. And as Susan mentioned, there's a Summit House at the very top, which is pictured here. Thomas Cole was the founder of the Hudson River School of Art, and he was quite taken by this vista, painting his famous work entitled View from Mount Holyoke, Northampton, Massachusetts, after a thunderstorm, which is perhaps more commonly known as the oxbow, which refers to that oxbow shape in the river as it meanders past Northampton. If you've been to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, perhaps you've seen this there. It's one of their featured works in this Hudson River School of Art. Our next destination is just south of the Five Colleges region. It's Springfield. And Springfield, like many former industrial towns, is not as thriving as it once was, but there's still a fair amount to see and do. If you're based in the Five Colleges area, Springfield would be a great day trip, for example. Perhaps the best known attraction in Springfield is the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. Why is the Naismith Hall of Fame in Springfield? Well, in 1891, a 31-year-old instructor, James Naismith, at Springfield, what is now Springfield College, invented the game to keep college students active during the winter months, which can run on for a while in New England. So I know for years it was attributed to the YMCA in Springfield, and there is some relationship between the college and this YMCA organization, but really Springfield College is where it was invented. Every year, the Naismith Hall inducts new players, coaches, and other individuals that have made an impact on the game. The current number of members is about 400. It's an impressive 40,000 square foot site, which documents the history of basketball and all of its great players. You can see some of the striking architecture with the big globe that sort of symbols basketball, and it's a neat building. If you've got children, or if you have grandchildren, or even just have fond memories of Dr. Seuss books, you'll want to budget a couple of hours to explore the amazing world of Dr. Seuss, which is in Springfield. The museum opened up about 5 years ago, and it's a fitting tribute to the Springfield-born author, Theodore Geisel, and his beloved characters, Sam I Am, the Grinch, Yertle the Turtle, Horton, and many others. Outside of the museum, you'll find the Dr. Seuss Sculpture Garden, which predates the museum by several years. The final attraction that I'll mention in Springfield is the Springfield Armory National Historic Site. This important site was actually founded in 1777 by George Washington and Henry Knox. It served as a secure storage and manufacturing facility for armaments through the early days of the Republic, into the Civil War, through World War I and World War II, and it finally ceased operation in 1968 after nearly 200 years of service. It currently contains the largest collection of historic American firearms in the world. So if you're interested in firearms and their history at all, you'll see plenty of them on display. You'll also see how they were made back in the day. You may recall Shae's Rebellion from history class, in which a disgruntled Revolutionary War vet led by, or a group of vets led by Daniel Shays, led an armed uprising to attempt to overthrow the Massachusetts government. They marched on the Springfield Armory in 1787 by the hundreds, but the rebellion was ultimately put down by the Massachusetts state troops and the militias in the area. At its inception, the Springfield Arsenal was actually joined by another US arsenal in Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. Though the two arsenals were founded at the same time, they have different characters. The firearms manufactured at the Springfield Armory benefited greatly from mass production, and it helped to improve their uniformity and reliability and spare parts and all that sort of thing. But the guns from the Harper's Ferry Armory relied more upon the handwork of their artisans, their expert craftsmen, and were widely considered to be more beautiful works of gun art with the greater use of brass inlays and such, though they didn't have that same standardization that the Springfield arms had. So at this point, Susan's going to take us west from Springfield in the Five Colleges region towards the Berkshires.
So now we're moving west to the Berkshires, which is the mountainous area west of where we were. We're going to talk about Williamstown, North Adams, Pittsfield, Hinsdale, Lenox, Stockbridge, and Great Barrington. And on the map of Massachusetts, you can see the Berkshires pretty much borders Vermont, New York, and Connecticut. On the far western side of Massachusetts. So Williamstown is located in the farthest northwest corner of the state, very close to New York and Vermont. It has a population of about 8,500, but it's really known for it being the home of Williams College. It boasts this renowned college as well as two pretty nice art museums, pretty fine art museums. Williams College is, one of the top liberal arts colleges in the nation. It offers many events that are open to the public, that are cultural events, speakers, musical performances, plays. And so if you're in the area, you will want to check out the events that are going on at Williams College, because it might be fun to stop by and see something that's going on campus. And while you're on campus, you will definitely want to check out the Williams College Museum of Art. It's a dynamic art museum. It's a college art museum, which is always exciting because they're usually a little bolder than maybe some of the institutional art museums. And it draws on collaborative efforts of the multidisciplinary atmosphere of the college itself. And so there's a lot of diverse art there that is going to inspire the students as well as the professors that are on campus. And it has a growing collection that engages the students and the community alike. If you haven't visited a college art museum, I highly recommend it, whether it's at Williams or Smith or any of the other colleges, because they have a unique collection in general compared to other museums. But less than a mile from the Williams College Museum is the Clark, which is the Sterling and Francis Clark Art Institute, pictured on the lower portion of the screen. And it is truly a world-class art collection. The New York Times described this museum as a place of serene excitement inside and out. And you can see from the picture, it's an absolutely serene and stunning exterior. It sits on 56 acres, and it has recently gone through some pretty extensive renovations. And most notably, you can see this facade along the reflecting pool. This is the raw concrete visitor center and gallery pavilion. And it was designed by a Japanese architect, Tadao Ando. And it was really, it's a standout feature of the museum. It's positioned beside the still waters of this tiered pool. It includes temporary exhibit galleries that are sunken kind of below ground level and connected by a concrete glass stairwell. It's really, the interior of it is absolutely spectacular. And it's a very inspiring space. It's much larger than it appears from the outside. Inside, you're going to find galleries with some very well-known painters: Winslow Homer, John Singer Sargent, George Inness, Claude Monet, Henry de Toulouse-Lautrec. So it's a really amazing art collection, but the building itself is also amazing in its own right. About 6 miles south of Williamstown is a 316-acre nature preserve known as Field Farm. Field Farm is managed by the Trustees, which is a group in Massachusetts that is committed to land conservation as well as heritage conservation. At Field Farm, there are about 4.5 miles of hiking trails, and that pass through swamplands, ponds, and an area called Caves Lot, which features underground channels that water had cut into the limestone. There's also an international style house at Field Farm that was built in 1948 by Edwin Goodell. It's operated as a bed and breakfast and an inn. And then there's another smaller guest house known as the Folly. And the interesting thing about the Folly is the sculpture garden and the beautiful manicured gardens that are on the grounds of the Folly. And both of these houses are modernist style houses, and they're nestled kind of against the backdrop with views of Mount Greylock, which is the highest point in Massachusetts. And so it's a really spectacular view. And as I said, just to the east of Field Farm is Mount Greylock. It is the highest point in Massachusetts at 3,491 feet. The drive up to the summit is open until about November 1st, when it has to close for the weather. When you're at the summit, you can see as far as 90 miles on a clear day, and you can see 4 different states: Massachusetts, Vermont, Connecticut, and New York. The park itself includes 12,500 acres of wilderness and 50 miles of trails that kind of crisscross the mountain. Part of the trails are the Appalachian Trail that run from Georgia to Maine. So it runs right through Mount Greylock for about 12 miles. So if you ever want to tackle part of the Appalachian Trail and you're there, you have a chance to do that when you're visiting Mount Greylock. During your visit, you'll be immersed in spectacular natural habitats. There are 40 species of rare plants at Mount Greylock, and there's red spruce trees that are protected as a national natural landmark. In the 1800s, the trees on Mount Greylock were considered prime logging, and so they came down. They started cutting them down, but the locals came together to protest. And in 1898, Massachusetts officially set aside Mount Greylock for the people to enjoy and to stop the logging and the destruction of the natural habitat. So the summit of Mount Greylock is the Veterans War Memorial Tower and the Bascom Lodge. And they're both worth visiting. The Veterans War Memorial is a 93-foot granite lighthouse. There are 89 steps to the top that lead to an observation deck, which you can get these panoramic views of the mountains and the valleys and all 4 of the states that I mentioned. And then the Bascom Lodge is a really handsome arts and crafts style lodge that was built in the 1930s by this Civilian Conservation Corps. And it was opened every season to give snacks and meals. And now there are concerts and talks. And there are even rooms that you can stay in this rustic lodge if you would like. It has a dining room with it's a large dining room with high oak beamed ceilings and a stone fireplace, and it's very atmospheric and worth stopping in and getting a lunch if you happen to be there at lunchtime. And it was originally intended only to be a place for hikers to take shelter from the elements, but it eventually became a really favorite destination for people in the area and worth visiting. The other claim to fame of Mount Greylock, if you happen to be a Harry Potter fan, or if you know any Harry Potter fans, according to J.K. Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter, at the summit is the location of Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, which was allegedly founded in the 1600s by a wizard who came to Massachusetts with the Pilgrims on the Mayflower. An Irish orphan named Isolde Sayer is said to have left Plymouth Plantation with a Muggle friend and constructed a stone house on the summit to teach witchcraft and wizardry. It is concealed from non-magic gaze, so from all of us, I think, by powerful enchantments, which sometimes manifest in a wreath of misty cloud. So if you happen to be up there and there's a misty cloud at the top, you'll know that they are concealing their the School of Witchcraft and Wizardry here in North America. From Williamstown, North Adams is about a 5.5-mile drive to the east, or a 12-minute drive. According to the North Adams website, it is the smallest city in Massachusetts. North Adams is steeped in art, culture, and community, and in fact, community is a common thread that runs throughout the cities and towns in Western Massachusetts. North Adams really makes the perfect hub for exploring the Berkshires. There's plenty of contemporary art, music, outdoor recreation, fine dining, and independent shops and retail and antiques like in Northampton, as Mike was mentioning. One of the first stops that you may want to make when you're in North Adams is the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art, and that's shown here on the left. It is one of the largest contemporary art museums in the world. It is housed in a converted Arnold Print Works factory building, so it's a really massive space. And this industrial buildings that make up the complex of the Art Institute are as much a part of the visit as the art itself. It's one of the largest centers for contemporary visual art and performing arts in the United States. The space is open and vast, and there's indoors as well as outdoor space. And it really allows for these massive art installations that are experiential because of their size and their scope. The place is pretty epic. And the space, there are many twists and turns, and it's really kind of easy to not see the whole museum. You might want to work your way through a couple different times to make sure you don't miss anything. But the exhibits are very captivating, and they're ever changing. One of the favorite exhibits is a permanent exhibit by Sol LeWitt, and it's these massive painted walls and bright colors and geometric designs, and it's really pretty. It's amazing to see in pictures, but it's even more amazing to see when you're there. So there's everything from sculptures to virtual reality, painting, photography, even graffiti on display at the museum. After a visit to Mass Mocha, as it's known, if you worked up a thirst, there is a microbrewery across the way. It's called Bright Ideas Brewery. And if you are interested in porter beers, the chocolate porter is definitely worth a try. The Mohawk Trail is the next stop on our tour. It runs east to west across the northern quadrant of Massachusetts. It opened in 1914 as one of the first auto touring roads in the country. It's a 69-mile scenic byway that meanders through the forests and these historic towns along the way. It was originally a Native American path, and it leads from the Hudson and Mohawk River valleys in New York to Deerfield and Connecticut River valleys in Massachusetts. And one of the most interesting parts of the trail is right just east of North Adams, and it's this hairpin turn that I showed you in the middle picture here. That makes a sharp turn as it works its way up the mountain. There's an observation point at the western summit where you get excellent views of the mountainous portions of southern Vermont and northwestern Massachusetts, and you can see Mount Greylock that I was just talking about from here. And then you can continue on up to the summit, which is Whitcomb Summit at the end of the trail. When you're in North Adams, there are a couple of notable places to stay. There's the Tourist Motel, which is no ordinary motel. It's a really modern looking motel done in blonde woods. This picture on the far right is a picture from one of the balconies of the Tourist Motel. It's pricey at $270 a night, but it has a very modern feel set in this beautiful nature. You can take paths into the woods. They have a yoga studio, wind chimes that are going, and they have really great farm to table food at their restaurant as well. So it's definitely worth a visit. Porches Inn is right across the street from the Mass Mocha, and it is like 6 buildings connected with front porches, really unique places to stay, and it's definitely worth a visit as well. If you get tired of doing museums, then you can head on to Rambo Wild Adventure Park. It is it's a fun adventure park. It's zip lines, and you're up in the canopy of the trees. It's about just a few miles outside of North Adams, and it's definitely worth a break from the museums and the other interesting things that you've seen so far. And then finally, we'll head to the Trailhouse Kitchen, which is in North Adams, and it is a farm to table restaurant that's worth checking out, where they get their produce and their meats from the local farmers of the area. Pittsfield is our next stop. While you're in Pittsfield, the first thing you're going to want to try to do is to take advantage of the Berkshire Scenic Railry. It is about a 7-mile trip or an 8-mile trip, but it takes about 70 minutes. And it takes you through the most beautiful parts of the Berkshires in a 100-year-old train car, where you can see the fall foliage in all of its glory. From there, you may want to try checking out Herman Melville's Arrowhead. And this is the house where Herman Melville lived when he wrote many of his great works, including Moby Dick. And you can tour his house and see his grounds, and you can see Mount Greylock in the distance. And it is rumored that Mount Greylock, covered in snow, was what inspired Herman Melville to write about Moby Dick, and it reminded him of the whale. So you can see what you think about that. From Arrowhead, we can go to the Hancock Shaker Village. And the Shakers are similar to the Quakers, and they lived in the Shaker Village until about 1961. And that's when it became then a historic site. And it's you can go tour the property, you can see how the Shakers lived, and get a feel for what life was like for the Shakers. From there, we'll head on to Jiminy Peak Mountain Resort, which is a really fun adventure park where you can do zip lining and ride on an alpine coaster in the warm months. And in the winter, if you're there when it's snowy, they have skiing and snowboarding, and it's a great way to blow off steam from some of the more educational visits. And then finally, out of Pittsfield, there is a really cool bike tour. There are several different companies that run bike tours through the Pittsfield area that are farm to fork bike tours, where you start at the Hancock Shaker Village and you ride throughout the area of Pittsfield and enjoy the local produce. So you might stop and pick apples and enjoy cider at Bartlett's Orchard, and pick and brew herbal tea at Helia Native Nursery, and then end up back at the Hancock Shaker Village, where you can eat at their restaurant, Seeds. So it's a lot of fun. So real quick, Hinsdale is in Massachusetts as well as in Illinois. Hinsdale, Massachusetts has a couple of interesting stories. The most notable was that when Paul Revere did his famous ride, there were other writers that rode along with him. And Israel Bissell was a post rider, and he rode, legend has it that he rode 345 miles from Watertown, Massachusetts to Philadelphia, raising people with a cry, to arms, the war has begun. It took him more than 4 days to make this ride. But when he got there, he carried a proclamation, a call to arms that spread the word of the American Revolution. And today that proclamation is in the archives of the Historic Society of Philadelphia. And he settled in Hinsdale, Illinois, or Hinsdale, Massachusetts. So that's the Hinsdale, Massachusetts claim to fame. But if you're there, you may want to stop by and visit Glendale Falls. It's one of the most beautiful waterfalls in Massachusetts. And with that, I will pass the mic to Mike, who's going to tell us a little bit more about the area.
Thank you very much. Continuing south from Pittsfield, you'll soon come upon the affluent community of Lenox, Massachusetts. Notable residents of the town have included George Westinghouse and Andrew Carnegie. These and other moneyed families would often live in these grand estates that were in town and outside of town in Lenox. One such estate was the Mount, which was home to Edith Warden, notable socialite and Gilded Age author of novels like Ethan Frome and The Age of Innocence, for which she won a Pulitzer Prize. What is less commonly known about Edith Warden is that she first made her mark as an interior designer. In fact, she co-wrote one of the very first books on the topic, which was entitled simply The Decoration of Houses. She bemoaned the bad taste and the gaudiness of these grand cottages that you would find in Newport, Rhode Island, favoring a more refined and restrained approach. She personally designed the Mount, in fact, which was built in Lenox in 1902. It's well worth a visit to see its interior as well as the impressive garden and grounds. Lenox is probably best known nowadays for being home to Tanglewood, the summer home of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. There's not a whole lot to do at Tanglewood in the fall, but if your visit happens to be in the summer months, seeing a lawn concert at Tanglewood should be high on your list. Getting back to the estates of Lenox, there is one called Spring Lawn, which was built in 1904, shortly after the Mount. It was designed by Guy Lowell, the architect of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. If you fast forward to the 1970s, in an organization called the Bible Speaks College, took up residence at Spring Lawn. It attracted hundreds of followers to its campus, and thousands more would tune in to the regular radio broadcast of its religious leader, Carl Henry Stevens Jr. Unfortunately, the Bible Speaks allegedly used cult-like tactics, encouraging its members to liquidate their assets and donate them to the church. There were also rumors of inappropriate relationships between church leaders and members. Stevens was quite charismatic at the time, even attracting an heiress to the Dayton Hudson Company, who was convinced to donate about $6 million to this organization. Fortunately, through a lawsuit, she was able to recover much of her lost money, and the Bible Speaks had to declare bankruptcy and move to Baltimore, where it morphed into a different organization called the Greater Grace World Outreach. Interestingly, there are churches in the Chicago region currently affiliated with this GGWO organization, and the radio program, which was founded by Stevens, has actually evolved into the Grace Hour, which is popular to this day. Also in this town is the highly regarded Shakespeare and Company, a live theater group, which has performances throughout the summer, and there may be something happening in the fall as well. If you're looking for farm to table fare, Lenox offers a number of choices. Church Street Cafe and Cafe Lucia are popular options in town. A little bit south of Lenox is the picturesque and touristy town of Stockbridge. Both Stockbridge and Lenox get an influx of tourists, and this is true of all of the Berkshires really, an influx of summer tourists from New York, who are looking from a break from the city, with many of them actually owning second homes in this area. Stockbridge features a historic property called the Red Lion Inn, dating back to 1773. It's a large property on Main Street and served as a popular stopping point between Albany and Boston. You can see the big white building in the center of the top level of the slide. 5 different presidents have stayed at the Red Lion Inn, including Franklin and Theodore Roosevelt. Interestingly, there have been some reports of ghostly happenings in room 301 at the Red Lion Inn. So either seek it out or avoid it at all costs, depending on your supernatural preferences. Stockbridge may be best known for being the longtime home of the artist Norman Rockwell, whose portrayals of daily life in America on the cover of the Saturday Evening Post are much beloved. He worked for this publication for 47 years, in fact, generating some of America's most iconic images. One of his famous works is Stockbridge Main Street at Christmas, which is shown at the bottom here. It's an 8-foot wide painting, and it captures the charm of Christmas in a small town. And is so cherished in Stockbridge that they actually recreate this scene every December. And they even gather up classic cars of the era and park them in front of these buildings. Interestingly, later in his career, Norman Rockwell became more socially conscious, creating works that spotlighted race relations and other issues in America. He resigned from the Saturday Evening Post when it became clear that they were not really on board with this new focus of his. Instead, he took his talents to Look magazine, where they encouraged him to capture America as it was rather than as it used to be. In 1964, he created a painting for Look called The Problem We All Live With, which recreated the moment a 6-year-old Black girl named Ruby Bridges was escorted to her desegregated first grade class by US Marshals in New Orleans. You can see this and many other works at the Norman Rockwell Museum in town. Stockbridge is also home to Chesterwood, the summer home of Daniel Chester French, the famous sculptor of the Lincoln Memorial statue of the seated Abraham Lincoln. Visitors can explore the studio and gardens from May through October, and there's a 1-hour guided tour if you'd like to take advantage of that. If you're looking for a leaf peeping opportunity, you might want to drive down the Jacob's Ladder Scenic Byway, which runs from Stockbridge east to the Five Colleges region, ending in a town called Russell. According to legend, this was the first highway built for automobiles, achieving peak popularity in about 1920. Today, it serves as a more scenic alternative to the Massachusetts Turnpike across the western portion of the state. It's a 35-mile stretch of beautiful road, perfect for getting the fall colors. Finally, I'll mention Jacob's Pillow, which is home to an annual festival of dance, drawing tens of thousands of visitors every summer to nearby Beckett, Massachusetts, which is just to the east. Again, this is not really a fall destination, but could be a great addition to a summer itinerary that you may have. Our final stop in the Berkshires is Great Barrington, which is due south of Stockbridge. It's a lively town with tons of boutique shops and great restaurants. It's been described as sort of a cross between the New England charm of Stockbridge and the hipness of Brooklyn. You might drop in to Karen Allen Fiber Arts to see some great knitwear. In fact, if the name Karen Allen sounds familiar, it's because she was an actress and is continuing to be an actress. She was in Indiana Jones playing Marion, Indy's sort of plain speaking and self-possessed girlfriend. She was also in Animal House for an early version of Karen. So she actually studied this in college, and it's kind of a return back to one of her passions. There are a diverse set of dining options in town, including farm fresh restaurants like Cafe Adam and the Prairie Whale. And for a lovely vista to check out the fall colors, you should consider Monument Mountain. The hike to the summit is of moderate difficulty, but it's doable by most people, even kids, if they have sturdy enough shoes. And this mountain is notable for Nathaniel Hawthorne and Herman Melville, who met here for a hike in the summer of 1850, and they got caught in sort of a major thunderstorm, ultimately deciding to wait out the thunderstorm in a cave in the mountain. Melville at this time shared some of his ideas for a new novel about a sea captain and a quest for a whale. And this, of course, turned into the beloved American classic novel Moby Dick. So given the abundance of beautiful scenery and quaint towns in the Berkshires and the Five Colleges region, we really could only scratch the surface of the things that you could do here. But I'd say a trip here at any time of the year would be memorable, but especially during the fall, the changing colors could make it really magical. So Susan and I would welcome any of your questions or comments at this time, either in person or from the Zoom audience. You can use the chat function, those of us who are with us on Zoom, and let us know what you think or some ideas you might have for your other co-attendees.
Have any of you been to the Berkshires? No.
Western Mass.
No.
Well, it's really a special place. I spent some time during the fall there, and it was really one of those vacations that I'll remember for a long time. And I wasn't even there at the peak. I was a little bit before. Yes.
If you do plan to go like the peak period for colors, do you have to make reservations for hotels or for any of these venues that you want to go to, or can you just drive up and there'll be availability?
So the question is, should you be reserving in advance, or is it possible to sort of just show up at some of these towns and get reservations? I think it's pretty advisable. This is like crazy numbers of people descend on New England and Western Massachusetts. So I think it would be hard. You might be able to do it, but I would be a little nervous about being turned away at the inn if it were happening to me. What do you think, Susan?
Yes, I think so. And also I would recommend that you anticipate jacked up prices,
Yeah, what?
that you anticipate higher prices during the peak season too. We made reservations in Massachusetts early this September and again later in October, and they're doubled in October.
That's a good question. Any others from the audience remotely, or those of us who are here in person?
Are there any national parks in this general area?
Question about, are there any national parks in Western Massachusetts? I don't think so, unless the Appalachian Trail has some sort of a special designation.
I don't think so.
But that takes nothing away from how spectacular they are.
The state parks are really incredible. They're really gorgeous, and there are a lot of them.
Any other questions? Well, Susan and I will be sending out a link to the slides so you can actually look at those at your leisure. If you have any questions about anything that you've heard tonight, you can certainly ask either Susan or myself, and we'd be happy to get back with you with an answer. Thanks very much for attending. We hope you found it useful, and have a great evening.